Sound now, everybody. How is sound? Let me know how the sound is going. I've had some pretty big issues with sound today, and I don't know why. Very confused. I have one mic that's broken on me today, and another mic that worked fine a few minutes ago and is not working now, so I'm not sure what's going on. Um, oh, Rochelle, you found a baby Espanoli today. Emotional support isopod enclosure. I love it. I've got two of those at work. Okay, well, I'll try to be loud, a little louder. I'm glad that the sound is working to some degree, but it's just I'm without a mic, apparently, because this mic, my backup mic decided not to be a backup mic, decided to be a not mic. So that's why we didn't have any sound. And just a few minutes ago, honestly, just a few minutes ago, it was working. It was working fine. So, Tobias, that is awesome. Glad your giant canyons had some babies. And yes, I know what you mean, Rochelle. You see some baby isopods and everything changes. So, I love the little scales, the coloration. This guy is almost solid black, but he's got a few scales near his neck. And of course, the chin is almost always paler than the rest of the body, but he's got a few along the sides, and that's what makes him very recognizable. There's Crystal, and there's Frank, and Aunt Sandy's skinks. Awesome. So, I have, this is a garter. This is an eastern garter, Thamnophis sertalis, melanistic phase. Love this guy. This is the one with the most non-black pigment on it. My others are a lot more solid black. Let me grab a couple more, just a second. They know that it's time to eat. They know they're going to get fed because they can smell it. I've got some rodents thawing for them. See, here's one. There's almost no light pigment in this one. So there you go. I see magnificent animals. Mr. and Mrs. Morelli is here. Ecosystem engineering. So Tobias, P. laevis orange and milkback will probably not breed. They're probably not the same species. The current wisdom is they're not the same species. I've had P. laevis orange and milkback together for the past 3 years or so. No evidence of breeding. Oh, there's Wally. Welcome, Supreme Gecko. And Therapod Hunter. Awesome. Going to an Invert Expo on the 26th. I love going to reptile expos. I have nothing against reptile expos. I go and I love it. But I wish we had also invertebrate expos. We have invertebrates at our reptile expos, more and more now, but we don't have invertebrate expos around here. So hopefully my Isopods with me, you'll be able to jump back in. And so Tobias, are you talking about a good starter breeding project for Isopods specifically? Just making sure. Sealed freshwater ecosphere isopods. I have not done one, I don't think. Have I? I'd have to, think about that for a minute, but I don't think I have. Well, if you want to do something exotic, Tobias, and you want to do something that is a good starter breeding project. Now that's a little tricky, isn't it? See, something more exotic but a good starter. I have to think about that because most of the species I would recommend for a good starter projects are not particularly exotic, and a lot of the stuff that is more exotic, we have fewer options. I have to think about that. So, Beetle Guy, in so many ways and for so many people, inverts are the perfect pet. Agreed. And for me, they are among the perfect pets for sure. I have more invertebrates than I have anything else, and I hope you can still hear me. Okay. So that was a good beginning, a couple of garters. Now I'm going to show you something I haven't seen before. a little while ago, people were asking about the crocheted critters. This is a crested gecko that my daughter made. Check it out. She crocheted this guy. It's got a little fluff stuck on it. But there you go. This is a crested crochet that my daughter made. She also made a Chihuahua gecko. People were making requests, so she was honoring the request. And if you're interested in the request you made in a previous live stream, just contact me on Instagram, something like that, and we can get you a quote. This is a Chihuahua, a bigger one. Chihuahua, see the mossy cryptic texture like a Chihuahua? Love it. Much bigger one. Let's see. Let's go to some amphibians now. She made some axolotls. Check out these little axolotls. She made several axolotls in different colors. Here's a slightly smaller axolotl. I think there are three axolotls in here. Yeah, here's one that's got extra big eyes. It's a fun one. And Tobias, we could probably do a green basilisk. Speaking of green lizards, anybody recognize this one? This is, there's some poetic license with the coloration of the feet, but this is a emerald tree skink. They do sometimes have kind of purplish feet, so there you go. Emerald tree skink, lizard that's on my list. Okay. Someone was asking about dart frogs, so she did a couple of different dart frogs. Here's an Auratus. Here's one of those little, I think it's an Ufega, loosely based on an Ufega. There. And let's see. I'm pulling them out of a box, beetle guy. Fire skink is a good idea. I like the idea of a fire skink. Here's a sea jelly. It's kind of hard to show all on the screen at once, but it's got the nematocyst tentacles, all all the. It's got everything going on there. The sea jelly. I really like it. It's fun. And thank you, it's Cindy Skinks. I think so too. And then a couple more. Here's another cresty with a different pattern. And then here's the coup de grace. Okay, the last one. I'm going to scoot some of these out of the way so I can show you properly. But don't forget them that they're here, okay? Here we go. Here is a rubber ducky isopod that can conglobate. Check it out. It conglobates, unconglobates, deconglobates, whatever. Rubber ducky isopod. What do you think? Isn't that cool? I love it. So in most of these, the beetle guy, she designs, she finds patterns and then alters the design slightly. So like this one, she found an isopod, a conglobating isopod pattern, but she did the colors, chose the colors. And some of these she modifies, like I don't think this was an emerald tree skink pattern, but she modified it so it was more like an emerald tree skink, that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty cool. Oh, the long-tailed grass lizard, that would be awesome. I love Tachydromus. And it is. I was saying that the other day, that this is about the same size, within the range at least, of a Bathynomus giant ocean isopod, oceanic isopod, or deep sea isopod. But it is rubber ducky. Oh, supreme gecko. I love that idea of a walking stick. Oh, beetle larva plush. That's a cool idea. And Shambara, oh, glad to hear your zebras are having babies. Yeah, Tachydromus with a comically long tail. They already have comically long tails, so make one even funnier. And if you had a frill lizard and you put some kind of, I don't know, pipe cleaners in it or something so it would stay up, that would be cool. I can't remember what my child said, something about stiffening these legs. There was some way to do it, and did do it. Oh, I do have a spider plushie. It's kind of a prototype one. This is the spider plushie. So, yeah, I'd already shown that one, so I didn't show it this time, but yeah. Scorpion-tailed geckos. And Yotaro, basically, as far as these go, if people make requests, I told her, if people make requests and they see something they like, whatever, to contact me and we will make one. Species-wise, like not necessarily like made to order in all specifics, but if you say I want a dart frog, this dart frog came from that. Somebody asked about it. Somebody asked about emerald tree skinks. That's why we did this. Somebody asked about crested geckos, and somebody asked about chahua geckos, and so that's where these came from, because people asked for them. So we'll do them, and it's not like, you know, we guarantee it'll come out exactly how you want, but yeah, basically. So the short answer. So there we go. So if you are interested, especially if you were one who posted about these earlier and you're interested in something like this, totally DM me and we'll see what we got. If you're interested in one of these specifically, my child can churn one of those out pretty fast. She said this one, I think, took 5 hours. The conglobating rubber ducky. So, pretty cool. And now, I am going to show you something else here. I'm going to have to change the focus. Ooh, a Dimetrodon? Yeah, that's a good idea too. I like that. You can put some, like a piece of plastic, maybe needlepoint canvas in the fin to make a Dimetrodon. She's thinking of setting up an Etsy shop. Thinking about it. But what we want to try to do is sell these, first of all, just kind of through Aquarimax, so she gets an idea of, you know, market interest and all that stuff. We're going to take some to the expo coming up in May and sell some there for sure. So yeah, it should be pretty cool. Yeah, my child has found that by doing crochet, they can kind of, it's the happy place, you know, kind of zen out. So it's nice. Yeah, that's true. Taylor Swift Scorpion, yes. So the whip scorpions, what I want to do, if I can focus on them properly, I'm going to take the lid off here. You can see one now near the bottom and one is near the top. And I'm experimenting on the best way to do this. Just kind of playing with the camera angle and whatnot. So bear with me as I try to figure this out. What I would like to do is see if we can get them to eat on camera, which would be cool, I think. It would be very cool. I've done that before. I've filmed them eating. I have some fairly popular videos about that. But I think I've done it a couple of times. How's that? Can everybody see fairly well what's going on? Focusing in. So I am hoping to get some babies from these. So Tito Brunacci, can isopods climb glass? They can if the glass is dirty or scratched. So Mr. and Mrs. Merlia, thank you for the super chat I just saw. Says, your appearance on the Animals at Home podcast was great, was very detailed. Was there anything you forgot to cover or wish you had mentioned? You know, good question. I remember thinking, oh wow, there's a lot of things I didn't actually say that I wanted to get to. We kind of ran out of time, but it was a lot of fun. And just off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything specific that I wish I would have said. I just remember at the ending saying, well, that was fun and we covered a lot of good stuff, but I feel like we could have kept going, and there would have been a lot more that I could have said. And good point, Wally, for bringing that up. Since they can also climb up silicone, especially when it's dirty, but even when it's not. So good point. Best isopods for bioactive beardy. Are you used to keeping things damp, not arid so much? Well, as long as you have an area where the isopods can stay, can hydrate, then there are some species that can do fairly well. I've heard of people doing dairy cows, because the dairy cows will be munched on by the bearded dragons to some extent, which helps because the bearded dragons are so, the dairy cows are so prolific, and they're actually fairly arid tolerant as long as they have hydration station. So it has worked for people in the past. I find that that's what I've heard people have used with bearded dragons. Not the only thing, but there you go. So what I want to do now, they do look kind of interested in eating to me, especially the one down at the bottom. So I'm going to put a few crickets in. These crickets are sized appropriately for these tailless whip scorpions. The one at the top doesn't look terribly interested, but we'll see if we can get the one lower down to eat, and we'll just kind of chat as we watch it. They're kind of fun and mesmerizing to watch anyway. You can see one of the crickets coming into the shot. We'll see how this goes. Usually you can count on the crickets climbing a bit and possibly exciting the tailless whip scorpions into hunting. I just have to try to make sure the crickets don't get out, because they're going to try. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, that makes sense. Some of them are really kind of shy, and Delma and Diadema are on the shy end for sure as far as tailless whip scorpion goes. I eventually want to branch out into some more species that are less reluctant. I've heard even some of the blind species, because they can't see light, are actually quite bold, like some of the Euphrenicus, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be remembering wrong. Notice you can see some springtails down at the bottom. Ooh, theropod hunter. Yeah, it sounds like your scorpion could be in pre-molt. Ooh, is that cricket of interest? Maybe it's going to ignore the cricket. I don't know. That didn't bode terribly well. It doesn't look like we're going to get a lot of action out of that one, but who knows? Could change. Sorry, the focus keep losing the focus. Well, we'll let this go another minute or so, and if it doesn't, we'll change things out. We'll do something different. So I have other plans too about what I want to do. I was just kind of hoping this might pan out. It has before. I've gotten some really good footage of it. If you haven't seen a tailless whip scorpion hunt, I have at least 2 videos posted in which they eat. And theropod hunter, you found a site that sells blind cave crickets. Interesting. As feeders or as pets? Let's see. Can't really tell if he has one. I can see there's a cricket right next to him on either side, actually. 2 of the crickets are up there. They're kind of flanking the tailless whip scorpion. And it is employing its one of its antenniform legs in there. No, that's the antenna. That's the antenna of one of the crickets. And Alex, glad to hear your blue death fainting beetles are doing better. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I don't want to damage the antenniform legs of this one, so I'm going to just gently kind of coax it so it's hopefully off of the top. So Alex, are you the one I helped with the blue death fainting beetles, or are you talking to Frank? Because I did help someone with blue death fainting beetles the other day, and I could be just confusing you with somebody else, though. That's very possible. He doesn't want to move, but as long as I can make sure I'm not setting this down on the antenniform legs, we're good, and I can do that. I can see what I'm doing. I think. Maybe not. I don't want to be overconfident here and screw up. I've never damaged an antenniform leg before. I don't want to start now. Here, buddy. I don't want to crush your antenniform legs. You're in like the worst possible spot right now. Here, you go down. There we go. That's how we have to do it sometimes, huh? There. And put this guy away because you're obviously not ready to eat right now. But I do have this right here. What I would like to do, we'll focus down on here. See if I can get some focus. Can everybody tell what species is in there? That is, these are panda kings. Yep, I see some of you doing that. So Mark Hartley, you got your seed pair of giant African millipedes. Ah, awesome! I see what's going on. That's awesome. Those are incredible millipedes for sure. I hope that works out for you. Yep. So a lot of people were able to see the pandas. What I would like to do today, there are a lot of pandas in here, but I was noticing as I did my Instagram post that there's a lot of frass. There's a lot of frass in here. So, and there's a couple of deceased individuals. It's not like a mass die-off or anything, but I saw a few, like, see there's a little portion of an exoskeleton right there, but it's too much of one to have just been a molt. So, oh, that's not cool. So what I wanted to do is go through here and redo the substrate a little bit while we're chatting. We can go through. You can see how I do this process if you haven't seen it already, or just kind of, be along for the ride. We can chat as we do it. Let's see. Oh, theropod hunter's getting some white sharks. That's pretty cool. And Luch Carlucci, congratulations on the Mankai. That is fantastic. With your rubber duckies. Good sign. And yep, Christina, you were jumped in on the live. How many of you were in the live the other day that I did with Jesse from Shapes in Nature? Did we have, how many of you were there? That was a fun one. It's kind of a surprise for you. I didn't really post it anywhere until the day of. Was it the day of? I think it was the day of, or maybe it was the day before. I was kind of late on doing it. I wanted to post it, and I shared it. Shared it on Instagram. I shared it on my various places, I think. But I didn't share it super in advance. We were actually going to do something on Thursday, and then ended up moving to Friday, and it got so I got a little behind on stuff. But I shared it wherever I could. Peter shared it on the Bugs in Cyberspace social media, and Shapes in Nature posted it on Shapes in Nature social media. I posted it on my Instagram and wherever else I did, wherever I posted it, because I really wanted people to see it, and we enjoyed it. And then actually we got really good watch. We had a very good audience, but we also had very good rewatch. So a lot of people watched the dead stream, as it is sometimes called. And it came out pretty good. I think we enjoyed learning a lot about aquatic insects, and I'm really excited to share my video with you on Friday, which is about aquatic insects. I had a few mic problems, so it's a little quieter than would be otherwise, but it came out pretty well anyway, I think. So Tobias, how many types is too many? I don't know if there is a too many if you can take care of them. As long as you can keep taking care of them, that's the deal, isn't it? If you find that you're having too much difficulty to take care of them, you're not providing them a good home, I think that's too many, probably. that point. You either need to change the way you do things or reduce the numbers or something. So now this is all, half of this is new substrate approximately. You know, I never do it exactly. And now I need to dig through and put the ones that got away. Basically, they're down in here in this substrate. I know there are quite a few of them. I need to get them out and put them back in this enclosure. So I'm going to start gently sifting through, seeing what I can see, and moving them over. There's two right there. And as I do this, we can keep chatting, and you can see them moving around in there. The hand monster. Oh, Luch Carlucci getting the Porcelio Valencia. That's a species I haven't had. And I haven't had Porcelio Bolivari either. That's, or Bolivari, as some people say. Hadn't had it. It was on my permit, my original permit. I don't know if you can still get them permitted, but at the time you could. And it's just one that I didn't add to my collection. And maybe it's too late now. I don't know. We'll see. So Molly Content, rubber duckies, it depends on who you talk to. Some people do just fine with not that much ventilation for them. And other people swear by giving them plenty of ventilation. So it kind of depends on who you talk to. I think you can make it work in a glass enclosure. Some people give them minimal ventilation, and other people give them barely anything, where they just, you know, periodically open the lid and count that. So I think you can do it. I've done it with very little ventilation and been okay. Currently, I have most of my rubber duckies in something that has a decent amount of ventilation, and they're doing fine. They just dry out more quickly. Look at that panda. Basically no stripe through the middle of the back. I do get some aberrant pandas in this colony, I've noticed. Many of them have just weird patterns. That one looks more typical. So let's see. So Gyotaro says, I have horrible luck with springtails. Does that mean I'm not keeping things moist enough? Not necessarily. I would be interested in seeing more about your setups and see what's going on. It also depends on your species of springtail. Different springtails can handle different things. For example, Cinella curvicetta, or I think it might actually be a different species, but that's what it's often labeled as and sold as and whatnot. That one, Cinella curvicetta, is pretty tolerant of some aridity, not too much, but I found them in enclosures and situations absolutely thriving, where you'd say, oh, how is that even happening? Seems impossible, but they do just fine. So kind of, that's not the same for every species. There are species that are much less dry tolerant. There are species that are more tolerant too. So, oh, 503, you got the springtail guy coming? That's awesome. Molly Content's getting the pandas soon. One of the milkbacks is completely brown or black. Huh. I wonder if that's a throwback to the wild type. It kind of sounds like it. It could be. I wanted to make sure to address the Patreon questions today. We have several of those. So let me get my stuff. Pull my phone out so I can pull up the comments and see what they say here. One, this was a question posted to me directly, but I want to answer this one too on the stream. From Ambo Makes. It was a question about the Lomi composter. Lomi is a kind of a kitchen composter, from what I recall, that you can put food waste into, and it'll compost right there in your kitchen, which is interesting. That's not generally how composters are intended, but this one is supposed to be able to do that. effectively without causing problems. And Ambo Makes was wondering, would that be something that I could use with my isopods? Could I use that compost as, substrate for isopods? And I think you probably could. It just depends on what material you're using, what you're composting. Because if you're composting, pesticide-laden things, I could see that being a problem. But if you're composting things and you're conscious of that and you're trying to minimize any sort of pesticide contamination, I could totally see that being a thing. Totally see it working. So, great question from Ambo Makes. Now I'm going to go back to the place where people leave comments typically. I'm going to try to dig those up. My screen's not updating very fast. That's weird. Okay. Is that better? There. Okay, now we got it. Okay. So Beatrice Johnson has a question. Says, I have gotten a tip to use a drainage layer of expanded clay, like the leca. The hydroton is another name for it. Basically the round clay terracotta balls. So it says, I've gotten a tip to use a drainage layer of expanded clay for species that want it more wet, like Cubaris and Marullinella. What is your thought on something like that to not getting it waterlogged? I have garden fabric as vents, so the moisture keeps longer, but all babies stay in the bin. So that is an interesting idea. I think I've heard of people doing that. I haven't tried it myself. With isopods in a just isopod enclosure, I've used similar setups in bioactives, and they seem to work well, and the isopods seem to do well in those setups with geckos and frogs and so on, that kind of thing. So I don't see any problem with it really, especially if you have, you want a separator between that drainage layer and the rest of the substrate. But one thing I would say is that I've only used it with substrates that are specifically intended to be aerobic substrates. Like typically isopod substrates like this, if they get too wet, most of the isopod specific substrates will pack and become anoxic if they get too wet. There's not going to be a lot of oxygen exchange in that substrate. And that is true whether or not it's got a drainage layer underneath. Drainage layer might help stave that off a bit, might help slow it down, may or may not, I'm not sure. But what I'm saying is, if your main substrate in an enclosure is something like this, if it gets too wet, it's going to be a problem, and that drainage layer may or may not help. If it's something more like ABG mix, which was specifically intended to maintain a lot of air transfer right through the substrate, it's basically fluffy, would be one way to put it. The substrate's extremely fluffy. It has things like tree fern fiber and so on. And the purpose of that is to allow the roots of the plants to get a lot of oxygen and to allow water to pass through it very quickly. It can get damp and it will retain moisture, but water will not wick through it, just like pass right through it down to the bottom. That's the idea. And into that drainage layer. So that is kind of an insurance against the top layer of the substrate becoming anoxic or waterlogged and causing issues. So that's sort of my input on that. If you do have a substrate like ABG mix or something like that, that's going to allow movement through it of air and water very freely, then I think that is a pretty good idea. And most people in the dart frog hobby, that was how people started keeping isopods, really, was in dart frog enclosures that were built that way. So we know that at least some species of isopod can thrive in a setup like that. Hopefully that helps, Beatrice. Let's go to Droth's question. It says, I noticed a behavior in my isopods, Armadillidium vulgare, that I suspected was mating, but after looking online I haven't been able to confirm. And now my search history is ridiculous. One of them will be fully conglobated, another will be curled around it, and they'll stay like that for a while. What are they doing? Well, what it sounds like is going on is probably mate guarding. So once an isopod has mated, say a male isopod is mated with the female, there is a period during which that female would be quite vulnerable to another male coming along and mating with her. And the sperm, I'm not entirely sure of the mechanisms of how this works exactly. So, but at any rate, the sperm from this subsequent male would be competition with the sperm from the original male. And that's, of course, evolutionarily speaking, not what the isopod wants. That isopod wants to reproduce and have the best chance that as many of the eggs as possible are fertilized by him and by no one else. So, in order to prevent another male from coming along and compromising his percentages of fertilizing those babies, fertilizing those eggs and producing babies, he will engage in mate guarding. Basically, if he sits on top of that female isopod and guards her, he's greatly reducing the chances that another isopod male will come along and mate with that female. And that is what you are likely experiencing. What you're likely seeing there is a male attempting to guard that female. It is also possible you're looking at some stage of courtship or attempted mating. But mate guarding is something that we commonly observe in isopods. I've seen it many times, and sometimes people wonder, well, it doesn't look like they're mating, but there's something going on. And a lot of times the female will be trying to dislodge the male from her back and jiggling around, and the male will be moving around, and they're saying, how could this possibly work? And that is because what they're seeing may be courtship or maybe mate guarding. It's not the actual mating itself. So Droth, I hope that answers your question. It is likely that that is what you are experiencing. So, silver tears. How do I know when it's time to get isopods, or how to tell when your enclosure is cycled? Well, great question. If you've seen my recent video on that, you know I've talked a little bit about that. Generally speaking, what I say, okay, now I'm going to have to save this substrate because I know that I haven't gotten all the pandas out. But I know that this is, and see there's a couple of them right there. I've gotten most of them out, but there could easily be a couple dozen or more in here, and I don't want to throw them out. So I'm going to set this aside and show you something more interesting than that, than just substrate. So, while I'm answering questions. So silver tears, let me get at something on the, let's look at something here. I'm going to guess that when I open this up, I'm going to see a few on the surface. Yes, Porcellia werneri. There are almost always a few on the top, which I love. So let's check those out for a minute. How do you know when it's time to get isopods or tell your enclosure is cycled? So you've got an enclosure set up and you're waiting to see when isopods can go in. So my recent video when I talked about doing things like adding flake soil or making sure you have wet decomposing leaf litter in there, or adding superworm or adding springtails, you can do all those things. And when you notice, so it's going to depend on what you do. First of all, any of those things that you do. So make sure you've checked out that video if you haven't already. But if you see springtails reproducing and you see leaves decomposing, I always consider that those are pretty good signs. There's decomposing leaves in there. There's springtails doing their duty there. You can see them breeding and thriving. Then you've probably started to get a decent number of, some microbiologically active substrate to some degree. Springtails are pretty fast breeders, but by the time you see them go from, I added a couple dozen to, there are hundreds of them in there, it's probably a pretty good bet. You can see there's a lot of young werneri in here. I think some of these are fairly recently born, which is cool. None of them are newborns by any means, but some of them are pretty young. I do love Porcellia werneri. It's interesting to me that the younger ones almost look like the same body proportions as Flavomarginatus, and as they grow, they get wider and wider. An example of allometry, how different parts of the body grow at different rates can influence the way isopods look. The Monkai might look exactly the same proportions, but since different parts of the body are growing at different rates, they can differentiate as they grow. So I hope for that helps, Silver Tears. I think it's a great question, and it's going to depend a lot on how you start. And just basically any sign that you see, like the decomposition of the leaves and the springtails reproducing and so on, can really help with that. So Don Gallagher has a comment too. Don Gallagher was asking about powder oranges. Said I got powder orange from a reputable breeder. They are reproducing like crazy, but some look blue. Is it normal to get blue and orange? Thanks, Russ. Well, good question. Good question. And what I would say is, even reputable breeders sometimes have stowaways. So you might have just a few blues that got in there, and since blue is a dominant trait in powder blues, it doesn't take much for that to be a thing. You could get one blue in there, theoretically, one male blue gets in there, and in the next generation, you're going to have a lot of het oranges that are blue. And so it's not hard for that to happen. Could potentially be a throwback. That seems less likely genetically that you're going to get a throwback, but it's not at all improbable that somebody got one blue in there at one point and then it became more blues because it is a dominant trait. Not a problem as far as if you're going to use them for bioactive cleanup crew or anything like that. Definitely not an issue. If you're trying to keep pure strains, then make sure you get every single blue out of there, because and you watch it, you're going to have to watch it multi-generationally because of the fact that the blue is dominant. So hopefully that helps. Great questions. All right, we have almost 70 viewers in here, which is fantastic. Thank you, everybody. And we have 44 likes. So let's see if we can get a few more likes there. Let's do a like spike. That just helps more people know what's going on here. And yeah, I actually stopped keeping the dwarf whites in my. I have some bioactives, but I don't have dwarf whites in my isopod room, and I don't have them. I don't sell them anymore for that reason, because I don't want to deal with the possibility of them infesting another culture. Oh, nice! Now we have 57 likes, so that's a sweet deal. Okay. Do we have isopod requests from what I have? I can see what I can do. I can't make any promises. But I can see what I can do. The beetle guy. Making a video about invertebrate shipping. I probably ought to do that at some point. This is my Porcellio spinacornis right here. They've been breeding pretty well. You can see some little ones in there. These are spinacornis yellow. I'm trying to see if I can find any adults, but I see some little ones, quite a few, kicking around in there. Oh, there's an older one. I wouldn't call that an adult. It's just a larger juvenile, but yeah, decent numbers of babies in there. Spinacornis are pretty cool. Okay. Let's see. I'm seeing some requests. So I saw a request for Werneri. I can do Werneri. That's pretty easy. Let's see. I have a new culture of Werneri wild types we can take a peek at here. See how it's doing. Here, 1 second. I want to get putting the lid on the Panda Kings here so that they don't get too dry while we're doing these other things. Oh, 74 in the stream now. Let's see if we can see some Werneri here. I see one. Lots of springtails in there. Oh, there's a few adults. Let's zoom in and see what we can see. These are wild type Werneri. And it's a fairly new culture. I got these from Jacob at Colony and Culture. We did some trading. And so, new to me. I don't know if there are any babies. I don't think I've seen babies in here yet. But they are very cool looking. Springtails, as you see, yeah, springtails are doing great in here. They seem to really thrive. If you look at the moss, this makes me happy when I see this in the moss. I know that I'm treating the springtails right when I see that. I feel like if I see a culture like this go back to your question, Silver Tears. If I see a culture looking like this, I know it's ready for isopods. So Pepe Rando wants to know if I keep any Trachelopus species. I don't, and I can. I believe I have a permit for that. I just don't have Trachelopus yet. I would like to get some of the pumpkin pods, Trachelopus rathke pumpkin pods. I just don't have any. So here's another colony in which the springtails are doing really well. And, oh, more red springtails and rights. That's awesome, Theropod. I don't even have any red springtails. I would like some. These are my Wernerei orange. And they're doing pretty well. Most of the ones you see here are babies. In fact, all of these, well, babies. These are juveniles. None of these, some of these might be just maturing. I don't see any adults right there. Let's see if there's any adults on this one. This one here is almost, it's probably sexually mature at least. And some of these others are too. I just don't see any of the full-sized ones. But I love the color on these. I really want to get some of the Armadillidium klugi Montenegro orange too. So if any of you have that and you want to do a trade or something and you're in a country, you know, in the U.S., continental U.S. where I can ship to you, and we could trade, then let's talk about it, because I could probably trade several different species for some of those Armadillidium klugi orange, if you have them. And 503, yeah, some springtails just are adventive, and it's nice. You find one that does well in the environments you like. Oh, Beetle Guy, I love it. The name Marmalade for these? That's genius. Yeah, you know, these are some of my favorite orange isopods because the white really sets them off. And another one that's really my favorite, one of my favorites is Aniscus ocellus BC Maple. I showed those on my Instagram channel the other day. They're gorgeous too.